Perfect. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Brew's Professor Coffee Chat. Today, we have a really special guest with us who is a professor within Rotman right now. And my name is Erin. I'm the founder and the head of operations here at Brew, and I will be moderating today's Q&A. So I hope you enjoy. So today we have Professor Shannon Liu, who is an assistant professor within the Strategic Management Department. She has a PhD in economics from the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and her research interests include entrepreneurship, social economics, and applied microeconomics. So today we're going to have a really meaningful conversation with Professor Shannon Liu about business, Rotman, and how you as a high school student can get a head start and what you can expect in university. So welcome, Professor. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Erin. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I'm so excited to lead this conversation today. I know our students would equally be excited to listen. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here so that we can just have a really nice conversation. So the first question that I have prepared is if you can tell us a little bit about your career path thus far.
Sure. So good morning, everyone. So I finished my undergraduate in 2012 from Zhejiang University in Hangzhou, China. And then I went to the US, I went to Stanford, as Erin mentioned, and finished my PhD from Stanford University. So that was from 2012 to 2018. And then I came to University of Toronto right after my PhD to become assistant professor. I've been working in Rotman since, so it's almost 4 years now.
Wow, and it sounds like you almost have always had everything figured out for you because you were immediately able to become professor right after. Was becoming a professor something that was always a career aspiration for you, or was it just an opportunity that you were able to take on?
I would say it's more of an opportunity, and I love learning. So it might be a little surprising to you, but being a professor is all about learning too. It's very close to being a student, and I get to learn what I wanted to learn. And I never felt that I learned enough from school as a student. So I'm just changing an identity, but still learning. The core is the same.
Wow, and I can't believe you got your PhD at such an amazing school as Stanford, and you're still like, I want to learn more. Like, that's crazy, and I think it's really inspiring to our students actually, because I feel like a lot of people don't really know what comes after undergrad, and a lot of students don't realize that the learning actually continues, like you mentioned, way after you graduate. That's amazing.
For sure.
That's amazing. And right now we're talking to mostly high school students or even first and second year students in university, but a lot of students don't really know what it means to be a successful student in university, especially in the context of business. So what kind of key characteristics have you noticed in past successful students?
So the characteristic that the students that perform well in school and continue to perform well after school, I think there are, I guess, a few distinguishing characteristics. One is they're very driven, right? They wanted to succeed. They wanted to be like sort of make a path of their own, and they're very confident, right? So willing to take risks and try different things. I think they're also very hardworking. And I guess once you have the combination of the three, success is just right waiting for you at the corner.
Right. And I feel like a lot of students get easily burnt out or feel like their hard work isn't necessarily a lot of the times, especially in bigger classroom settings. I know, especially in first and second year when it's hundreds of other people in there. So I think, like you mentioned, like it needs to be the combination of all three, like being confident in yourself while also being hardworking, I think is also really important. Kind of a really quick follow-up question to that one. What do you kind of recommend for students in terms of the ways that they can stand out to professors in a bigger classroom setting?
You mean reach out to the professors, so get sort of more individual attention?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I guess, so I think I was lucky because when I was a student, I got a lot of attention from professors. Part of the reason being I always like to sit in the front row and follow classes. And so I think it's also it also disciplines you, right, to pay attention to the professor. Because if I sit in the back of the classroom, there are all sorts of distraction. And by sitting in the front and coming early to the classroom, I sort of get more attention, and both from the professor, but also I pay more attention to what's going on that the professor is talking about. And I think that just that familiarity that the professor see you every time, every class, build that special relationship, and then you can reach out for either questions for the content or help with other sort of personal life. And I think I was lucky because both my parents are university professors. And so when I grew up, like I never was afraid to reach out to either my primary school teacher or middle school teacher or university professors. They were never really intimidating to me, but I understand some of the students might find the professors intimidating. And I think it's not all the students' fault, because some of the professors are intimidating, right? So some of my colleagues are intimidating. So I think sometimes you also have to kind of read the person. So if the person, because I know many of my colleagues might have more virtually in doing research rather than in teaching, and they might appear awkward, kind of interacting with the students, but they have other virtues, right? So then maybe not expect too much from those professors, but do reach out to those that you feel like they do care about, and they're very nice, they're very patient. And so pick the person, and then be confident, and respect the time of the professor. It will work out, and you both will benefit from that relationship.
Wow. And wow, so I just personally took away so much from that, because I think one of the scariest things transitioning from high school to university was it's not Mrs. whoever or Mr. whoever anymore, it's Professor whoever. And the title itself, like you mentioned, is really intimidating. And I think from a student's perspective, like taking little steps such as coming to class a little bit more early, right? Like showing your face to the professor a little more often by sitting in the front row. When you mentioned that it also kind of disciplined you to pay attention, you realize that it also is just most beneficial for the student as well.
Yes.
So I think that's a great tip. And how you mentioned at the end there that it benefits the professor as well. Like, I guess us as students don't really realize that the professors also appreciate kind of talking to us and gaining new insights from us. So that's really inspiring.
Yeah, it always feels good, right? To be helpful, to be useful, and to have an impact, and to raise someone up. So that's always good.
Right. And I've personally haven't really, I don't think, connected with very many professors in university, especially in first and second year, which is one of my biggest regrets. But since you mentioned kind of the fitness as well, like kind of read the professor, are they the type that kind of work with you, that want to help you? Are they nice, right? And so I think that's why what made me so comfortable, I think, reaching out to you as well, because you were very like vocally open helping your students. So I'm super glad we're having this conversation.
I'm glad you feel like that. I'm glad.
No,
Yes.
you definitely, I love your class personally. That's awesome. Perfect. So I think another question that a lot of maybe slightly upper year, maybe second and third year students might have is I feel like working with a professor that you really want to build a genuine connection with, whether it be as a TA or a research assistant. Other than it looking good on your resume, I think it's a really, really big and great opportunity for the student to get to know more about the professor's studies and also just help the class out, and just kind of grow as an individual in that sense. So what are your personal do's and don'ts for a student applying to be a TA for your class?
Yeah, so you probably noticed this that I have this so this is since my second year of teaching. Like once I had students, former students, I've always implemented this policy that my TAs for the course are former students of the class. And so I've been very privileged to work with many great undergraduate in this process. It's actually pretty simple. So you do well in the class, and as you said, you build a connection even before you apply. So I usually every year I have maybe 40 applications. Some of them are from MBA students, some are from undergrad, and a portion of it, maybe 5 to 6, are from former students of the class. And usually there are a couple who did really well, like A plus or A, but there are only a few who actually already built this trusting relationship that I know the person before he applies or she applies. And also I was informed in advance that they are interested in this job. And I've always given to those students I know well of and also perform well in the class, the job. And so I think that building the trusting relationship, building that connection before application, and making sure that the professor know that you wanted to do the work in advance would be really, really helpful, at least in my case. I know some of my colleagues, maybe they don't care so much about that personal relationship, but I do. I do. So read the professor. Read the professor.
I think that's awesome. And like you mentioned, like building a connection, I think it just applies to everything. Like if you want to be successful in the course,
I would think so.
If you want to work with the professor, I think that genuine connection, a lot of students don't realize that gives you such a big benefit, right? Like in your success of the course and also working with the professor. So that's a really great tip. Do you have any specific, like, don't absolutely like never do this when you're applying?
Yeah, I guess maybe not really a don't, but I wanted to share this anecdote. So the RTA this year, Abney, so this is the second time he does TA. So he took this course 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and then he graduated already. So he was TA for last year, and this year he applied again. And I wasn't sure whether to work, because I know other students are lining up who wanted to do the job and always wanted to sort of give someone at least a chance. And he already had his chance. So I thought I wanted to give it to someone else. And so I asked him, why would you like to do it again? Right. And so he told me because he wanted to become an adjunct professor in the future. And he really wanted to kind of learn to mentor and learn to teach and learn to help develop the course, which is something he didn't do last year. And so that sealed the deal, because I thought, oh, indeed, I can give him more. Like this experience, the second experience can give him more. So I guess another, so I try to think more from the do, right? So from the side of what you should do, right? So in this way, it's letting, first of all, making, like, be honest with yourself why you want this job. Because I know some students are doing it only for the money. Their heart is not in it. Well, maybe don't do it for the money. Don't do it for the money. Do it because it's meaningful and it's really useful, right? And so figure that out on your own, and don't be afraid to make the professor know.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned some really great points there. Like I think mentorship actually at Brew is very, very big, because the majority of our program is pairing a high school student one-on-one with a current university undergraduate student of their program of choice, and building that one-on-one connection so that they can get insights from the university that they wouldn't hear from online or from the university website or from a recruiter. So when you mentioned like kind of mentoring and kind of building the course together, I'm like, oh, wow, that's a great connection to what our organization stands for. So I think that's amazing. And in terms of, I think, the current TA's answer to why do you want to do it again, it definitely seems like they want what's better for the course and not necessarily like personal benefits, just more like, here are the visions I have for the course. I want to pursue the visions with you.
Yeah, indeed. That's a good takeaway.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And I feel like being a TA, like you mentioned, a lot of students are, I think, or at least from the students I know, it's either one or the other. One being like they want to do it for the money, or two, they think it's going to be too much work, or it's too intimidating. But I think if you have the genuine interest and passion for the course, that's the most important, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I personally am really enjoying your strategic management course. I'm a management specialist myself, but I think I'm just getting new insights that I never really even thought of. So I'm gaining a lot from your course. But what do you think is the most beneficial topic that your students should take away from your course?
I would think the key insight is the idea of trade-off, right? So whenever you make a choice, you actually make trade-offs. You cannot have it all, but making trade-offs is not necessarily bad, right? So in our course, it actually sets you apart. And so it actually is a defensive strategy almost, right? So others won't being able to replicate it if you make the right trade-off. But I think it also helps you find a position. It applies to a business to find a position in the market, but I think it also applies to an individual. So find a position in this world. So I think the idea of trade-off is the most important. So important insight. But of course, it takes years to sip in, for sure.
Yeah.
And
Right.
yeah.
And the part that I actually found really interesting when I'm personally learning your course is that in class, when we're having discussions, I'd be like, yeah, like that makes sense. Like I totally get it. And then when I'm reviewing lectures a couple days later, I'm like, this is actually kind of confusing. Like I feel like in the moment, because our discussions are so lively, it's so easy to understand, but the concepts are actually kind of a lot on your brain, I think, in terms of comprehending it and fully processing the information, which I think is what makes it so much more interesting as well, because I'm like, wow, like I want to kind of get to the bottom of this and fully understand this concept, because like you mentioned, like it applies in so many situations within organizations, but also outside of organizations.
Yeah, and so to be honest, my personal experience, this is not necessarily a lesson from my class, my personal learning experience. So this is a general lesson, which is in school, we learn so many abstract notions and concepts, and we thought we understand, but we only understand them in abstraction, in tests. And you really actually truly start to understand when you start living a life. So I would think students in school, particularly full-time, not necessarily living a life yet, but those concepts or notions will come back, and you will truly understand, you will truly relate to them when you start to see them manifest in your own daily life after school. So don't worry so much yet. Also, it's a general. So wait, I give it time. Give it time.
Right. I think that's really, really great advice. And I think after watching this, so many more students would love to be in this course, because I think a lot of the time students, especially I feel like in business, the content that you learn, for example, like economics or finance, it's so theory based and you need to apply it right in that moment for that specific course. But in the future, you might not run into the same type of notion or problem solving again, I feel like in a lot of the courses. But I think in your course, like you mentioned, it's kind of relieving, but also comforting to know that when we kind of enter the job field and are pursuing bigger things in the future outside of being in this bubble of being a student, we'll still be able to apply the knowledge and understand it as we grow. So I think that's another really great reason to specifically take this course. That's amazing. So
I think so. I just wanted to add on. So just going back to your earlier comment, right? So learning doesn't stop after you leave school.
Right.
And so you keep growing, you keep learning. And sometimes the growing learning is in the format of deepening your understanding of something you already know, or unlearn something you've learned. So it's all fantastic. It's a fantastic experience going through life. And so just be confident and enjoy it, I would say.
Right. And when you mentioned like don't worry too much, I feel like that's another thing students love to do, is just worry, like pick and choose things to worry about all the time.
I worry too. Easier said than done.
But I think students don't realize that in that sense, like you mentioned, like there's so much more learning and so much more growing to do once we actually step into the career field, because a lot of students just think we have to figure everything out now for the rest of our lives.
No, exactly. That's a really, really important takeaway, right? So you don't have to figure everything out now. You sort of figure out along the way.
And that's really great advice. And I think actually that leads perfectly into the last question that we do have prepared right now is what advice do you have for future business students, other than not worrying too much, maybe some specifics about like how you were able to, succeed in your academic career so far?
Yeah, so don't worry too much and don't be afraid to make mistakes. What's important is try to learn from the process, what you like, what you don't like. So that like the deeper knowledge, the deeper self-knowledge you have, the easier, I would say, the easier that you will be able to organize your future. And so, and making mistakes is actually a way to learn about yourself, learn about your capabilities, learn about your preferences. And so sort of just try, right? Yeah, and find all the help, the mentorship you can have along the way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think it's really hard, I think, to be confident as a business student, at least, especially in the first 2 years, because it is very competitive in nature. But also, I think a lot of students in first year tend to compare themselves a lot to their peers who maybe got into a club that they didn't get into, or maybe got a summer internship that they didn't get into. So what were some methods that you used to kind of gain that self-confidence and just kind of trusting in yourself?
Well, I have to be honest that I was lucky in this regard because I was always doing well in school. But even though I'm still in school, though I'm just a professor rather than a student, I do think school is a very, like you said, being a student is like being in a bubble. In a school is like being in a bubble. But what's unrealistic about the bubble is it's very homogeneous. So sort of everyone is competing against the same standard.
Right.
But in reality, in real life, it's not like that at all. Because it's just much more diverse. There's so much more choices you can make. And it would be very hard. And it was hard for me when I stopped being a student, when I stopped having to take a test and having to just always perform better than the others, because then I don't know what standard, what benchmark I can set for myself. So in the end, you're competing with you're competing with the old you. And so the earlier that you find who's the person you want to become, regardless of what others are doing and what the others think of you, it would be better. So try to grow out of that mentality. And I would think it's actually a great, so in that regard, the students who are not always the best students actually have the best opportunity to learn that lesson early. Because then they have to find a way to cope with the very fact that they're not they're not winning in this particular regard, and they find other area that they either just enjoy doing or they have a natural talent, right? They have a knack for such thing that's outside of school. And so just listen and see and try to think what life is teaching you.
Wow, I love that. So I think one really big insight that I got from that as well is that, academics necessarily isn't the only answer to pursue your career, and that university is a perfect place to kind of explore the different options that you have.
Definitely. That's exactly right.
That's amazing. And even myself, I noticed like in first year, everyone either wants to go into investment banking, consulting, like marketing. That's it. Like those are the only options. But then I talk to upper years that are in fourth year and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that sort of career path existed, or I didn't know this program existed, right? So it's like you kind of learn new opportunities when you seek for them, and then realize that maybe the courses that you're taking right now don't actually define your future, what you need to do in the future.
That's much more important lesson you learn from university than any of the class content. And you see, you didn't learn them from class. You learn them from living life. Right. And so life can teach you important lessons. So pay attention to life.
Wow. Pay attention to life. I think I'm gonna have that written on my wall. I think that's some really, really great insights. Thank you so much again for your time. I'm just gonna quickly share my screen. Again, just wrap the recording session up here. But thank you so much, Professor. I personally gained so much from this session, but I know that our students watching will also have a lot of wow moments when they're walking through this. So I did want to quickly wrap up with just our timeline. We are almost nearing the end of the year for the program. We do have a personal branding month coming up in April, and also our Understood panel recordings would be up very soon. So thank you again, Professor, for your time. And to everyone watching, thank you so much for watching, and make sure to follow our socials and check out our website for upcoming updates. So thank you.
Thank you and good luck to you all.
Right? And then